Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you guys like and subscribe on the following video. Today, we're reacting to Kitsune Anime. Why anime needs static characters. So, without further ado, let's get into the Vigia. That's full screen. There we
I'm
go.
gonna
My God, my ears. Hold on.
be the
There we
king
go.
of
Can I just say that of all the idiots, in all the idiot villages, in all the idiot worlds, you stand alone, my friend.
Facts. Facts. I've met few characters that are as retarded as Luffy. Yep, I can concur.
Yeah, he's a village idiot, but he's
True.
our village idiot. When it comes to
True.
storytelling, typically there's a spectrum that characters fall on. One side of the spectrum is what we would call dynamic characters. Basically, characters who have certain personality traits, ideals, or morals that undergo a significant change over the course of a story. A great example of this is Denji from Chainsaw Man. Denji starts the story off as a loud, inconsiderate pervert with no real social skills. Over the course of the story, however, he begins to form bonds, learns to actually appreciate people in a non-superficial way, and becomes, well, a normal dude. You know, aside from the chainsaws, but that's neither here nor there. On the other side of the spectrum, we have what you would call static characters. Characters that more or less see no changes to their personalities, ideals, or values throughout the story's duration. It's here that we can find
True.
everyone's favorite village idiot, Monkey D. Luffy. Since his debut, Luffy has remained fundamentally the same.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, right? Because I can see it to a degree where Luffy has basically undergone no character development. And it's the same thing with Goku. Like people try to break down the psychology of both characters and be like, "Oh, like this and this moment led to this and this decision and this and this and this and this and this." When in reality, it is more so that the character remains majority the same. Like Goku in when he was fighting the Red Ribbon Army is hardly any different than Dragon Ball Super Goku fighting Zamasu and Goku Black. Like it is very little a difference between those two characters. Those two characters are essentially the exact same that they have always been. Now one's probably a little bit more exaggerated than the other, and obviously appearance-wise, things change when he gets older, right? But more or less, they're the same. Now, that's not to say they haven't had any development, right? Because like Goku was in the same boat as Luffy, where he was the true like village idiot. Like he did not have a normal upbringing. He was not, properly taught to read and write and do like heavy arithmetic and all that stuff. And it's emphasized throughout the show and the random decisions that he makes. For example, when Vegeta told him to use his head when he was fighting Botamo, Goku took that literally and then headbutted Botamo. So, granted, Dragon Ball Super did tend to kind of over exaggerate that kind of duller side of Goku. So, obviously, that can have an effect on things, but more or less, Luffy is the same way. Like they have their qualities of which they can exceed, a person's expectations, and that's what kind of draws you into that character. Uh, because more or less, the main focus of development is not on them themselves. And it's the same thing with Luffy, though. Luffy has gone through a lot of development, obviously. We had the fucking loss of Ace in the story, which heavily influenced Luffy later on. And he went through a hell of a fucking arc of depression and fucking that brings people into his character more. But post that, out of that, even though Luffy has progressed as a character, he has still also remained that same Luffy from episode 1 that is always going to want to be the king of the pirates. Just like Goku always wants to be the strongest he can be. He wants to be the best. So that leaves your other side characters, your Sanjis, your Zoros, your Vegetas, your Piccolos. That leaves those characters to gain more development But I will say when it comes to shows that broaden the spectrum of, like, who they give development to, One Piece is one of those shows, like, every character, yeah, especially, like, this is probably gonna be the most, like, prevalent in everybody's mind, is Wano. Wano gave every single character its few episodes to really shine, really do something crazy. So I think that's essentially what they're trying to get at here. Obviously, not trying to offend people. Like they have had development, but more or less the character is the same.
Never falters in his desire for freedom and adventure and remains the same lovable rubber idiot he was over 25 years ago. So here's
True.
the spectrum, and really, there's no concrete rule that either of these are better than the other. However, ever since I became smart enough to indulge in the fine art of anime analysis and discussion, I've noticed that this side of the spectrum occasionally falls under scrutiny from certain fans. I mean, even on the
True.
most surface level metric, just compare the definitions of these two words together. Which one sounds more appealing? Dynamic, characterized by constant change, activity, or
Dolphins and rain.
progress. Static, lacking in movement, action, or change, especially in a way viewed as undesirable or uninteresting. Based off of the definitions alone, static characters sound, well, kind of boring compared to dynamic characters. But
True.
today, I'm here to tell you that that's bullshit, dude.
Yeah, because there's like so many like like I was saying earlier, there's so many things that have changed over the course of time for both a Goku and a Luffy. Um, that but essentially, like, in order for those characters to remain static, there has to be some sort of quality to them that does not change. So for Goku, it'd be like his childish behavior and his willingness to want to jump in every fight possible. And then for Luffy, it's the fact that he's a fucking village idiot and he cares about meat and he wants to be the king of the pirates. Like, there's those very central points to what makes that character what it is that have to stay the same. They cannot change that. The minute they change that is the minute that you no longer have the show, which is why you have to give them development in different ways, right? You kill off Ace. You uh you use Goku's lacking nature to it basically end all life on Earth. If you're in the Resurrection F arc, right? Um there are certain things and decisions that you have to put those type of characters through that don't fracture the main point of that character being there. That's what makes it a static character. Because that's the whole point, right? Everybody who signs on to One Piece wants to see Luffy be the king of the pirates. Everybody who watches Dragon Ball wants to see Goku become the best. Like, come on.
Think about it. If static characters were in fact fundamentally boring, then why are so many of the most iconic and beloved characters not only in anime, but in the entire freaking history of entertainment static characters? Here, let's take a, oh, I don't know, this
I don't know. Can you call Naruto a static character? Because I don't know. Because Naruto has gone through a lot of like actual like dynamic progression. Like if I were to argue, like you showed me Ichigo, you show me Naruto, you show me Luffy, you show me Goku, you show me these four characters, and you say these four characters are or for we'll do five characters. We'll do five characters. We'll add Gon to the list from Hunter x Hunter. So we have five MCs, right? If you were to ask me, okay, which one's dynamic, which one's static, I would say Goku is a static character, Luffy is a static character, Ichigo is a static character. But I would argue that Naruto and Gon are both dynamic characters because we see the influence of the decisions made by those individuals to change the fabric of what that character means and who that character is. For Gon, it slowly builds up over time. The Chimera Ant arc really emphasizes on this, and they take so much from Gon. And then Gon finally snaps, and he is no longer that same MC who simply wanted an adventure in the beginning of the show. He's completely consumed by sorrow, by anger, by fear, and it completely changes dynamically his whole character. But that's what made Hunter x Hunter so fucking good. When Gon snaps and he relinquishes everything in his being to use his Nen powers to their full capability, he changed his character. Another example of a static character would be Gintama. Gintama, he also did not change at all. Well, he changed a lot, but at the same time, he had a static development like Goku and Luffy and Ichigo. Um, and then Naruto, pretty much the same way, pretty much the same way as Gon. Like you could see that becoming the Hokage fundamentally changed Naruto as a character. And he's still progressing. I mean, we're not done with Naruto. He still has different like progression to his character even through Boruto. So obviously he's dealing with this fact that he has to balance his life as the Hokage and now not neglecting his home life and all of these different situations that have come up now have caused several issues, both in his personal and regular everyday duties. So Naruto is still progressing, and you can see that his past decisions in his life continue to fundamentally affect his current situations, you know, his current decisions. That's what I'm looking for. Uh, so I would argue that when it comes to characters like that, when you see the influence of past decisions influence current decisions, that's what truly makes a character dynamic and static to me.
This boring loser, for example. Goku is one of the most static characters to ever static character. That makes him so lame and dull, right? So lame and dull that they put his face on tons of merchandise, fast food promotions, video games, the Macy's Day Parade. That's how
Facts.
you know you've made it. All joking aside, Goku is a fixture of pop culture at this point. He's greatly loved and considered the template for other modern day shonen protagonists that are also widely loved. I feel like that alone is pretty undeniable proof that yes, static characters can work. They can work very, very well. And the biggest reason for this is because of Goku's personality. I mean, look at this. He's a perfect specimen. Why would you want to change him? Sometimes a character's personality is already great, and any kind of change would just be a hindrance. You want an example of a story that would be objectively worse if the character was dynamic? Look no further than Mashle. For anyone who doesn't know, Mashle takes place in a world where one's proficiency in magic is the measurement of their worth in society. So therefore, powerful magic users are seen as the elite, while those who can't use magic are deemed worthless. In comes this boring loser, Mash Burndead, who not only proves every single magical snob wrong, but does so in a hilariously over the
Did I hold on? I gotta see if I finish that show or not. Let me check the old Crunchyroll here. Mashal. Nah. No. I was wondering about that because I was like, I didn't know if I finished the show or not, but no, I did. I dropped it after 6. Mashal's okay. It's like the most like 5 out of 10 show I've ever seen.
the top fashion. And the key ingredient that makes every single one of these instances so funny is Mash's consistent deadpan personality and reaction. Something that just wouldn't work nearly as well if Mash was a more dynamic character. And that brings me to one of the biggest strengths that static characters can offer. It's less so about them changing as a person and more so how they change the world around them. Mash is a simple, very simple character. Oh my god.
I think Mashal is actually an example of the wrong way to do a static character. Um, if I were to offer an example of somebody who's doing or the static character correctly, I would say probably Saitama from One Punch Man. I think that is the proper way to do a static character because obviously Saitama, over the 2 seasons that we have, he has continued to progress as a character outside of his ambitions to want to fight somebody who's truly on his level and not beat them in one punch, which I get is the gag. It's the parody, whatever the fuck you want to call it, right? But Mashal does the same thing, except they strip Mashal of his personality completely, and they make him almost too simple. Whereas like Saitama has this like underlying character progression that keeps you drawn to him as a character. Goku has this underlying character progression that keeps you drawn to Goku. And same thing with Luffy. Like they all have their draw and then they also have their progression outside of it, right? So the staticness is always surface level. Like it's always static here, but there's dynamic changes here, right? But Mashal doesn't have that. It's just straight static. It's straight static. There's no dynamic anything underneath there. It is just straight static. So that's I think what made me drop that show was because I couldn't get into it.
I just look at his face. The genius of his character doesn't come from him, more so.
Yeah, cuz like I enjoyed the gags for a little bit and then I was like, "Okay, when are we going to do something here?" That's what I was wanting. I was like, "Give me something. I need something." And they didn't give me shit. They just like, "Oh, hey, look at this funny thing he did. Guess why? He's super strong."
How he interacts with everyone and everything around him. He basically brute forces the world to change through his actions, and that's what makes it so entertaining. That being said, that's not to say that static characters can't be flexible. I mean, have you seen how much Luffy can stretch? I'm sorry, that was a stupid joke. I kind of feel like an idiot for saying that now. I think there's a common misconception with static characters that they're only allowed to portray a certain array of emotions and can't experience change of any kind. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Static characters are indeed capable of feeling the exact same emotions dynamic characters can. However, typically when they go through any kind of turmoil or struggle, it's less for their personality or ideals to change, but more so for them to be cemented. Here, let's take this third boring loser, Naruto, for example.
I'm curious what he's going to say here because I would say that he's closer to the dynamic spectrum than he is um to the static spectrum. Because like his goal of becoming the Hokage has been realized already and now we see his character being changed both by his own decisions and in the decisions of others around him.
Naruto is nearly consumed by rage during his fight with Pain, but thanks to the intervention of Minato, Naruto is able to remember who he is, which cements his values, and he's ultimately rewarded for it. He recognizes the good in Pain and convinces him to revive the entire Hidden Leaf. This is why, despite the fact that so many people have their grievances with Naruto as a story, grievances that quite frankly, I can't fully disagree with. I will always have a special place in my heart for Naruto because of Naruto. He's just such a great, warm, comforting character that makes me want to go on this dumb, melodramatic ninja adventure with him. And I think that that's the biggest strength that static characters bring to a story. That often they're considered these reliable pillars that we can always look to in a story for comfort and familiarity. Anytime, say, Goku or Luffy get sidelined in their respective stories for an extended amount of time, whether it be through healing capsules or giant snakes, you immediately feel a sense of relief when they make their triumphant return. Yeah, there he is. That's my goat. That's my goat. They're like that friend you have that, despite how many years pass, never changes and is always there for you. No matter what happens, we'll always have them to rely on. And that sounds like kind of a nightmare for a writer. It would be so simple to write off static character writing as the easiest thing in the entire world, especially compared to writing a dynamic character. However, that probably couldn't be any further from the truth. Now, please don't misconstrue my words. That's not to say that writing a dynamic character is a walk in the park or anything. Writing in general is very difficult. However, let's look at what goes into writing a successful static character. Imagine the pressure of having to write a static character that is capable of capturing the hearts of millions and standing the test of time. That alone is an incredibly difficult feat. Now imagine you have to keep that character consistent throughout the entirety of the story. I'd equate it to maintaining a Michelin star.
I think the closest that we've had to that becoming a problem was actually the dubbing of Dragon Ball Z. I think that's the best example of a character that got taken out of its element and became something that it wasn't meant to be, because Goku became kind of more this hero-like figure and looked at more so as a savior in the Dragon Ball Z dubbing than it was so much in the sub, where the sub kind of kept its more, not saying that there wasn't elements of heroism in it, right? But for the most part, the playfulness was kept more so intact if you read through the manga and that sort of thing. But the way that they portrayed him and kind of made him a bit different in the anime had a big effect on the way that people look at his character, because I remember one of the biggest things was when Super was out and Goku was back to that truly childlike character that Toriyama wanted him to be. uh, there was a lot of scrutiny and pushback because people thought that they were character regressing him, and there was all these fucking like fundamental changes to his character. When really it was his character all along. It's always been his character. If you're an OG Dragon Ball fan, you know that's always been Goku's character. But that got lost in the sauce in Dragon Ball Z because he became more of a heroic kind of like not a guardian, but a savior character. Uh, Due to that, it really did change the way that people look at Goku as a character. And for better or worse, when they went back to what his character should have been, that didn't sit well with a lot of people. A lot of people didn't like that. They weren't a fan of it. They thought it was a bad choice. But most of us, we still stick with him, obviously.
Restaurant. Sure, getting a Michelin star is an incredible achievement if you're a chef. However, you also have to face the challenge of maintaining that Michelin star. You can put in
True.
the work to establish a great static character, but the moment you become inconsistent, the moment your well-established character does something they wouldn't otherwise do, then well, in the words of Gordon Ramsay,
Fine dining!
No, chef.
A fine f***ing mess!
I've mentioned Luffy a few times now, and I think he's actually one of the best examples of what I'm talking about here. What is it that makes Luffy so special? Maybe it's his ability to stretch, or his proficiency in combat.
I honestly think Luffy's gonna go through the same change as Naruto if they continue the series post One Piece, when he finally becomes the king of the pirates, if they continue the series for even if it's like a fucking 24 episode like final offshoot season, right? Um I think that is like the first time you'll see the dynamic change of Luffy because at that point you have to. It's the same thing with Naruto. Like Naruto's character is kind of unchanged in Boruto, but there's also a lot of dynamic changes he is going through now. And it is because his goal is realized. He's the Hokage. Like he's now at the point where he doesn't have to be the root of the fucking show anymore. Um that can now be passed to Boruto. And people would have been more willing, but the way that they executed Boruto as a show was not great. I ain't gonna lie. Was not great. Um I've never seen a fan base push back against its own material so much until Boruto was airing every week. Like what? That's crazy. Never in all of my time watching anime watched a community absolutely implode.
Combat, and yeah, these things definitely help, but really, what makes Luffy so special is who he is and always will be. In One Piece, whether it's the government, warlords of the sea, or the pirate emperors, there's always some kind of oppressive, overwhelmingly strong force on the horizon, spreading misery to the lives of so many people. But then you have Luffy, this goofy kid always joking around, the only thing on his mind going on fun adventures with his friends. And despite all the odds against him, it's always this consistently goofy, fun loving kid that brings all of these oppressive Goliaths crashing down. And that's just so satisfying and beautiful. I mentioned earlier how static characters can change the world around them. I used it to illustrate how it can be done humorously, but it can also be done emotionally. And
True.
again, Luffy is a great example of this. I mean, just look at
Also
all
true.
of these characters that Luffy has changed by just being true to who he is. He inspires everyone around him, whether they're in the story or outside of it in the real world. How many people do you think that Luffy has inspired to never give up on what they believe in? Considering that One Piece has sold, oh, I don't know, that many copies, there's probably a good amount. And I think that is why static characters matter. They're like an anchor that helps keep us stable in an ocean of uncertainty and chaos. And there's something deeply comforting about the fact that despite how much the world around us might change, they'll always remain the same.
Fair. Fair, fair, fair. Make sure you go to Kitsune Anime, give him a like, give him a sub. It's a good video. I like these videos. I like diving into this type of stuff because it's stuff that's like widely misunderstood or like widely not talked about enough in the different communities. But change is going to happen, I do think, at some point because eventually, like, I hate to say it, but there's always going to be a peak before the fall, and Naruto is kind of dealing with that right now. It's the first series to really start dealing with that, um, because Naruto has achieved what he wanted to achieve. He said he wanted to become the Hokage. He did. He's now the Hokage. And now we're dealing with the fact that you have to fall in love with the story all over again because that original draw, that original lovable character is no longer static anymore. He's got his goal, and now he's dynamically moving forward with different changes, losing Karama, losing several fights due to the now responsibility he has both to the village and to his own family, of keeping them safe, keeping them healthy, right? That's a tough thing to do. And we are starting to see that he's dynamically making decisions based off of those principles alone. And you could try to argue that that has always been Naruto's case, but that Naruto had something to prove. This Naruto doesn't. he's protecting what he's already attained. So, that's quite the change for a character. That's quite a dynamic change to a character that has been mostly static. Um, Whereas, Goku has yet to truly become the best. He has yet to um truly become the strongest. Luffy has yet to become the king of the pirates. He has yet to get his hands on the One Piece. So we are still dialed in on their stories because their stories are not yet finished. Naruto's kind of feels like it's finished, and we're kind of just coasting along for the ride until we get that next character that's like, we can back this guy, which was supposed to be Boruto. But like I said, that community literally imploded. And there's a few like Boruto defenders out there, but that's about it. That's about it. But I do think it eventually come back. Um, Hopefully with a better way of writing it and animating it that would make it more attractive than it was, because we're in a different era when it comes to um the way that you put out these shows, right? And that's why like Dragon Ball Super has like such like criticism behind it. One Piece continues to be popular, but it still also has just as much criticism around it because it continues to uh drove up these old fucking methods of flashing back to the past, ruining fights, doing these 10 to 15 second to 20-second pauses, like fucking freeze frames on a single moment. And it's just like, what the fuck, man? Um, so obviously, there's improvements to always be made, and that goes for any show out there right now. But yeah, no, I love these type of videos. So make sure you go give them a sub, give them a like. I love this stuff. Give them a comment too. Let's get it. Let's push them up there. So appreciate you all. I'll catch you on the next video. Later.